Attention! The case you are about to hear has been concealed for decades. Before we begin, write in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is at this exact moment. The human heart stopped beating 14 minutes after death. That was when Dr. Frederick Holloway claimed the soul departed from the body, and that was precisely when he believed it could be called back. It all began in Boston, United States of America, during the bitter winter of 1941. While the world was consumed by the flames of war, Dr. Holloway worked in the shadows of Massachusetts General Hospital, conducting experiments that would never appear in the official medical records. According to documents archived in the basement of Boston University Medical Library, Dr. Frederick Holloway was once considered a brilliant neurologist. His early research on electrical impulses in brain tissue had earned him recognition among the scientific community. But after the sudden death of his wife, Eleanor, in 1939, colleagues noted a disturbing shift in his behavior. He became obsessed with what he called the electrical signature of consciousness, the theory that human awareness could be preserved and reactivated through precise electrical stimulation. The first indication of his unorthodox research came in the form of a laboratory requisition form dated January 7, 1941. The document, discovered during a renovation of the hospital's East Wing in 1972, requested unusual equipment, a modified electrocardiograph machine, high-capacity electrical transformers, and specialized silver electrodes. The request was approved by Dr. Walter Perkins, then Chief of Medicine, who later claimed he believed the equipment was for legitimate neurological research. Nurse Margaret Collins, whose handwritten journal was donated to the Boston Historical Society by her daughter in 1988, described Dr. Holloway as a man consumed by purpose. She wrote on February 3rd, "Dr. H. barely leaves the laboratory. His eyes are hollow with exhaustion, yet burn with a strange intensity. Today I heard him speaking alone in his office, as if explaining complex procedures to someone. When I entered with his coffee, he was standing before Eleanor's photograph." The official hospital schedules show that Dr. Holloway requested assignment to the overnight shift in the morgue facility, citing his ongoing research into post-mortem neural activity. This request was granted as the war had created a shortage of medical personnel willing to work such hours. Witness statements indicate that few questioned his presence among the deceased in those dark, quiet hours. A previously sealed police statement, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests in 2002, contains the testimony of Harold Jenkins, a hospital janitor who worked the night shift during this period. Jenkins reported hearing strange mechanical humming sounds coming from the basement morgue on several occasions. Sometimes there were flashes of light under the door, like summer lightning, and once I swear I heard someone crying out. But when I asked the doctor about it the next morning, he just smiled and said it was the new refrigeration system acting up. In late March, staff began to notice discrepancies in the morgue records. According to hospital administrator reports filed in April 1941, several bodies appeared to have been moved from their assigned drawers, while others showed unexplained marks on their temples and chest. An internal investigation was initiated but never completed. The war effort had become the primary concern of hospital administrators, and resources for such inquiries were limited. The most disturbing evidence of Dr. Holloway's activities emerged in a personal journal, discovered behind a loose brick in the old morgue wall during renovations in 1967. The journal, confirmed to be in Holloway's handwriting by 3 separate forensic analysts, documented his experimental procedure in clinical detail. Subject 4, he wrote on April 2nd, male, approximately 60 years of age. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. Time since death, 11 hours, 28 minutes. Applied primary electrodes to the temples, secondary to the chest cavity directly above the heart. Voltage increased gradually to 200. No response. Increased to 300. Subject exhibited minor muscular contractions. Increased to 400. Subject displayed significant spasmodic movement, including facial contortions resembling expressions of pain or fear. No signs of consciousness restoration. Electrical signature remains dormant. Eleanor remains beyond reach. According to employee records, Dr. Holloway hired a research assistant in early April, a young man named Thomas Webb, who had been rejected for military service due to a heart murmur. Webb's employment file contains little information beyond his starting date and a notation that he had previously studied electrical engineering. No photograph exists in hospital archives, and his personnel file is conspicuously incomplete compared to other employees from the same period. On April 17th, the night security log shows that Dr. Holloway and Webb signed in at 8:15 in the evening, but never signed out. The next entry in the security log, dated April 18th, notes that Webb called in sick. Dr. Holloway, however, arrived for his shift at the usual time, though the attending nurse noted he appeared unusually agitated. A letter found among Dr. Perkins' personal effects after his death in 1956 sheds some light on the events of that night. Written by Dr. Perkins but never sent, it states, "I fear what Frederick has become. Tonight I went to check on his progress, hearing that he had made some breakthrough. When I entered the morgue, I found him standing over a body, a young man, connected to that terrible machine of his. Frederick did not acknowledge me at first, so intent was he on adjusting dials and checking measurements. The corpse was fresh, too fresh, and bore a striking resemblance to his assistant. When I demanded an explanation, Frederick merely said, 'Webb volunteered. He believed in the work. God help me, I should report this, but it would mean the end of both our careers.'" The following day, April 19th, Dr. Holloway submitted a formal request for a power upgrade to the morgue facility, claiming his refrigeration units required additional electrical capacity. The request was approved without inspection, an oversight that the hospital board would later deeply regret. Records from Boston Edison Company show an unusual power consumption pattern beginning that week. The morgue's electrical usage tripled, with significant spikes occurring between the hours of 2 and 4 in the morning. A maintenance report dated May 3rd noted that the circuit breakers for that section of the hospital had to be replaced twice due to unexplained overloads. The first public indication that something extraordinary was occurring came from an unlikely source. The Boston Evening Transcript published a small article on May 10th about strange lights and electrical disturbances reported by residents living near the hospital. One witness, Mildred Abernathy, claimed to have seen blue-white light flooding from the basement windows in the early morning hours, like the whole building was filled with captured lightning. Dr. Holloway's journal entries from this period grow increasingly erratic. Pages contain complex electrical diagrams interspersed with passages that alternate between scientific observation and personal lament. On May 15th, he wrote, "The electrical signature persists after death. I have measured it. I have seen it fade. But with sufficient power and precise application, it can be temporarily reinforced. Subject 12 showed ocular tracking movements for 7 minutes before the pattern degraded. They are there, just beyond the veil. Eleanor is there. I need only to generate enough power to break through permanently." Hospital records indicate that on May 20th, a power outage affected the entire east wing of the facility. Emergency generators activated, but several patients on respirators had to be manually ventilated until power was restored. An initial investigation pointed to the morgue as the source of the disruption, but no formal report was ever filed. Dr. Perkins's appointment calendar shows a private meeting with Dr. Holloway scheduled for that afternoon. Whatever was discussed in that meeting, it appears to have had significant consequences. The next day, Dr. Holloway requested a 2-week leave of absence, citing personal health concerns. This request was immediately granted. During this absence, a maintenance crew was dispatched to the morgue to install additional circuit breakers and inspect the electrical system. Their report mentions unusual modifications to the standard electrical infrastructure, but contains no specific details about what these modifications entailed. When Dr. Holloway returned in early June, several staff members noted a marked change in his demeanor. Nurse Collins wrote in her journal, "Dr. H returned today, transformed. The fevered intensity is gone, replaced by a calm certainty that is somehow more disturbing. He smiles now, which he never did before." When I asked about his research, he simply said, "I have found the door, Margaret. Now I need only to open it wide enough for her to step through." On June 12th, the night watchman's log contains a curious entry. At approximately 3:15 in the morning, he responded to reports of screams coming from the morgue area. Upon investigation, he found the doors locked and no response to his knocking. He reported hearing a humming sound like 1,000 bees and feeling static electricity that made his hair stand on end when he touched the metal door handle. Rather than forcing entry, he contacted Dr. Perkins, who arrived 30 minutes later, and dismissed him, saying he would handle the situation personally. What transpired behind those doors remains largely unknown. Dr. Perkins never filed an official report regarding the incident. His private journal, however, contains a disturbing entry dated June 13th. "What I witnessed last night cannot be explained by modern science. Frederick has gone beyond the boundaries of natural law. The subject on the table, I cannot bring myself to call it a body, moved with purpose. Its eyes tracked my movements. Frederick insists it recognized him, responded to its name. But what I saw in those eyes was not recognition. It was something ancient and terrible. Something that should not have been called back. I have ordered the project terminated, the equipment dismantled. Frederick resisted until I threatened to expose everything. God forgive me for not acting sooner." Hospital employment records show that Dr. Holloway was placed on administrative leave the following day. A memo from Dr. Perkins to the board, marked confidential, cited concerns about Dr. Holloway's mental fitness following personal tragedy as the reason for this action. The memo requested that Dr. Holloway be referred for psychiatric evaluation at a private facility in Western Massachusetts. On the night of June 15th, before this recommendation could be implemented, a catastrophic electrical fire broke out in the East Wing of Massachusetts General Hospital. According to the Boston Fire Department report, the blaze began in the basement morgue area and rapidly spread through the building's aging electrical system. 3 patients and 1 staff member lost their lives in the fire. Contemporary newspaper accounts describe the electrical fire as unprecedented in its intensity, with multiple witnesses reporting that the flames burned with an unusual blue-white color. In the chaos of the fire and its aftermath, Dr. Holloway disappeared. His name appears on no passenger manifests, hotel registries, or residential records following that night. A missing persons report was filed by his sister on June 20th, but the investigation was perfunctory at best. Resources were increasingly diverted to war-related concerns. The morgue facility was completely destroyed in the fire, along with any equipment and research materials it contained. The hospital administration, eager to avoid scandal and focused on supporting the war effort, quickly rebuilt the damaged wing and discouraged further inquiry into the incident. Dr. Perkins submitted his resignation the following month, citing health concerns, and relocated to Vermont, where he lived in relative seclusion until his death in 1956. The case might have remained forever buried in bureaucratic obscurity had it not been for the discovery of a sealed metal box during the hospital's major renovation in 1967. The box, found within a wall cavity near the old morgue location, contained Dr. Holloway's journals, photographs, and a set of technical diagrams for what he called the soul conductor apparatus. These materials were briefly examined by hospital administrators before being placed in storage, where they remained largely forgotten for another decade. In 1978, Dr. Miriam Chen, a neurologist researching the history of electrical therapy, came across a reference to Holloway's work in Dr. Perkins' archived correspondence. Her requests to access the stored materials were initially denied, but with the support of the Boston Medical Historical Society, she eventually gained permission to examine the contents of the metal box. Dr. Chen's subsequent paper, published in the Journal of Medical History in 1979, brought scholarly attention to Holloway's experiments for the first time. She described his work as a disturbing blend of legitimate neurological research and quasi-mystical obsession, noting that some of his observations about electrical activity in recently deceased neural tissue predated officially recognized discoveries in the field by several decades. The most compelling item recovered from Holloway's box was a photograph dated June 12, 1941. The image shows a human figure lying on an examination table, connected to an elaborate apparatus of wires, vacuum tubes, and dials. The subject's face is not clearly visible, but electrodes can be seen attached to the temples and chest. Most disturbing is the clearly captured movement blur of the subject's right hand, suggesting it was in motion when the photograph was taken, hours after the subject was pronounced dead, according to the notation on the back of the photograph. Following Dr. Chen's publication, several individuals came forward claiming connections to the case. Most significant among these was Judith Webb, who identified herself as the niece of Thomas Webb, Dr. Holloway's assistant. In a sworn statement provided to the Boston Historical Society, she recounted family stories about her uncle's involvement with a doctor who thought he could bring back the dead. According to family law, Thomas had written to his sister in early April 1941, describing his new position and expressing both excitement and trepidation about the nature of the research. "My mother always told me that Uncle Thomas believed the doctor had succeeded at least once," Judith stated. In his last letter, he wrote that they had established what he called a momentary bridge between worlds. He promised to explain everything when he came home for Sunday dinner that week, but he never arrived, and we never heard from him again. When my grandparents inquired at the hospital, they were told he had quit without notice. Another intriguing testimonial came from Robert Chambers, who had been a 10-year-old patient at Massachusetts General Hospital in June 1941. Chambers claimed that on the night of the fire, he had witnessed something unusual from his third-floor window. "I couldn't sleep because of my fever," he recalled in a 1980 interview with the Boston Globe. "I was looking out at the street when I saw two people leave the hospital through a basement door. One was supporting the other, who seemed barely able to walk. There was something wrong with the second person's movements, jerky, like a marionette. They got into a black car and drove away just minutes before the alarms sounded. I tried to tell the nurse, but she was too busy getting everyone out of the building." Perhaps the most unsettling connection emerged in 1984, when renovations to a remote farmhouse in western Massachusetts uncovered a hidden cellar room containing electrical equipment similar to that described in Holloway's journals. Property records revealed that the farm had been purchased in June 1941 by a William Holcomb, a name similar enough to Holloway to raise suspicions. Local historical records indicated that Holcomb was a reclusive figure who rarely interacted with neighbors. The few descriptions that exist mention that he was always accompanied by a silent woman who never left the property. According to statements from elderly residents of the nearby town, strange electrical disturbances were commonly reported in the vicinity of the farmhouse during the 1940s. Lights would flicker all through the valley whenever there was a storm near that place, recalled Henrietta Miller, then 87. Some folks said they heard screaming during those storms, but others said it was just the wind. Nobody ever went up there to check, Something about the place just felt wrong. The farmhouse apparently burned to the ground in an electrical fire in October 1948 during a severe thunderstorm. No bodies were recovered from the ruins, and no death certificates were ever issued for its occupants. County records simply note that the property was seized for non-payment of taxes in 1950 and remained abandoned thereafter. The final piece of the Holloway puzzle emerged in 2007, when the descendants of Dr. Perkins donated his complete personal archives to the Boston Medical Historical Society. Among the papers was a sealed envelope marked, "To be destroyed, unread upon my death." The executor of the estate had failed to honor this request, and the envelope was included with the other materials. Inside was a letter addressed to the Chief of Medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital, dated June 20th, 1941, 5 days after the fire. The letter, never sent, contained Dr. Perkins' full account of what he claimed to have witnessed in the morgue on the night of June 12th. "What Frederick Holloway has done transcends the boundaries of science and morality," he wrote. "I observed with my own eyes the reanimation of a human body some 15 hours after death had been pronounced. The subject, a young woman whose remains had been unclaimed at the city morgue, opened her eyes and moved her limbs in response to Holloway's commands. Most horrifying, she spoke, though the voice that emerged bore no resemblance to any human voice I have ever heard. It was as if multiple voices were speaking in discordant harmony, some speaking words I could not understand. Frederick was elated, claiming his process had successfully recalled the subject's consciousness. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw nothing of humanity there. Whatever force animated that body, it was not the woman who had previously inhabited it. When the subject turned her gaze upon me, I felt a cold beyond any physical sensation I have ever known. I ordered Frederick to terminate the experiment immediately. Surprisingly, he complied, seemingly disturbed by my reaction. As the power to the apparatus was reduced, the subject began to convulse violently. Just before consciousness faded, she grasped Frederick's arm and spoke directly to him. I cannot forget the words. "Eleanor waits beyond. She sends this warning. What comes back is never what was lost." Frederick became like a man possessed after hearing this. He insisted that the experiment proved his theories, that with refinements he could bring back not just any consciousness, but specifically his wife's. I threatened to expose him if he continued, hoping this would bring him to his senses. He seemed to acquiesce, but I now believe he was merely biding his time. I have no doubt that the fire was his doing, a cover for his escape with his research. I bear responsibility for not acting more decisively. May God forgive me, for I cannot forgive myself. Dr. Perkins's letter was authenticated by handwriting experts, but the fantastic nature of its contents led many to speculate that it was the product of a guilty conscience or early dementia. The Boston Medical Historical Society ultimately classified it as historical testimony of undetermined reliability. In the decades since these events, various researchers and authors have attempted to piece together the full story of Dr. Frederick Holloway and his experiments. Some have suggested connections between his work and certain classified government research into resuscitation techniques that emerged in the 1950s. Others point to similarities between his soul conductor apparatus and early designs for electroconvulsive therapy equipment. A few fringe theorists have even claimed that Holloway's research laid the groundwork for modern deep brain stimulation techniques, though no credible evidence supports this assertion. What remains beyond dispute is the unusual cluster of electrical anomalies, unexplained deaths, and institutional silence surrounding Massachusetts General Hospital in the spring and summer of 1941. The hospital's records from that period contain numerous inconsistencies and omissions that cannot be attributed solely to wartime disruption. Something occurred within those walls that multiple individuals and organizations deemed worthy of concealment. The farm in western Massachusetts, where William Holcomb lived, has remained abandoned. Local government attempted to auction the property several times during the 1980s and 90s, but found no buyers willing to develop the land. Hikers occasionally report unusual equipment fragments among the overgrown ruins, though most of the site has been reclaimed by the forest. In 2012, a graduate student in electrical engineering discovered a series of patents filed in 1947 by a W.H. Holcomb for devices related to biological electrical stimulation. The patents contain diagrams remarkably similar to those found in Holloway's journals, though the applications described focus on therapeutic rather than resurrectional purposes. The patent applications were never approved, having been rejected on the grounds of insufficient scientific basis and potential ethical concerns. Thomas Webb's body was never found. No death certificate was issued, and his family received no official explanation for his disappearance. His name appears in no public record after April 1941. In the family plot at Mount Auburn Cemetery, his relatives placed a memorial stone in 1952. The inscription reads simply, "Thomas Webb, beloved son and brother, lost to science, remembered in love." The identity of the female subject described in Dr. Perkins' letter has never been established. Records of unclaimed bodies at the Boston City Morgue from that period were destroyed in a basement flood in 1963. However, the Boston Daily Record from June 10, 1941, includes a small item about an unidentified young woman found dead of apparent heart failure in the Boston Common. The article notes that her body was transferred to Massachusetts General Hospital for routine autopsy before final disposition. As for Eleanor Holloway, whose death appears to have triggered her husband's desperate research, cemetery records confirm she was buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery in November 1939. In 1949, the cemetery caretaker filed an unusual incident report stating that her grave appeared to have been disturbed, though no obvious digging had occurred. The headstone had been cracked by what appeared to be lightning damage, despite no storms being recorded in the area at that time. The Boston Medical Historical Society maintains a small collection of materials related to the Holloway case, available to researchers by special permission. Among the items is a photograph believed to be Eleanor Holloway. The image shows a young woman with dark hair and a serious expression, seated beside a window. According to those who have studied the photograph, the most disturbing aspect is not the subject herself, but what appears in the glass behind her, a reflection that does not match her position, as if showing a different moment in time or perhaps a different woman entirely. On stormy nights, electrical disturbances are still reported in the vicinity of the old hospital wing, despite multiple renovations and modernizations of the electrical system. Maintenance workers refuse to enter certain basement areas alone after midnight. Some claim to have heard the humming of equipment that draws no power from the building's circuits. In 2015, a night nurse reported seeing a man in outdated medical attire standing in the hallway near the current morgue facility. When she approached, he allegedly asked her if she had seen Eleanor, then walked through a door that had been sealed for decades. Hospital administration dismissed the account as the product of fatigue during a 20-hour shift. The nurse resigned the following week. The final entry in Dr. Holloway's recovered journal, dated June 14, 1941, reads, "I have seen beyond the veil. What lies there is not what we have been told. The electrical signature of consciousness persists, but transformed. Eleanor speaks to me through the apparatus, but her voice has changed. She tells me we can be reunited, but I must bring her a vessel. I understand now what must be done. The hospital has become an obstacle to my work. Tonight I shall remove that obstacle, And then Eleanor and I will find a quieter place to complete what we have begun. Some will call it madness, others will call it the greatest breakthrough in human history. I call it love, which conquers even death itself. Some say none of this ever happened, others prefer not to comment.